Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We were very fortunate this week. We got to grab Congresswoman Ann Wagner on her way back to Washington. Congresswoman, what are you flying back this weekend for?
Well, a real partisan charade, sadly. This is, I'm calling it the Nancy Pelosi $3 trillion socialist wish list.
It's trillion with a T, right?
With a T, yes. And it's really sad, Scott, because honestly, during this entire pandemic, we have been working together across the aisle in a bipartisan fashion with the Senate, the House, Democrats, Republicans, the White House. We've done probably 4 different phases of legislation totaling already $3 trillion, plus what the Federal Reserve is offering and opening up in terms of liquidity for others, helping workers, helping through unemployment, stimulus checks, small business relief, a lot in terms of health care and issues. But this thing is really sad, and it's too bad to haul us all back for this. But the worst of includes things like up to another $6,000 in rebate or stimulus checks, but this time not just Americans, to illegal immigrants are allowed to get this. You don't register through your Social Security numbers or your tax ID number. So including funding for sanctuary cities for illegals, allowing ICE to release detainees.
You understand the sanctuary cities go to the cities, but the actual to a person that's not here legally will get American tax dollars into them.
Yes, correct. Up to $6,000 per household in this package. And there's more. There's so much more. There's another $25 billion bailout for the post office. Now, it's our job to deliver the mail, but we've done $10 billion already to the post office through the Treasury for them to access. This is far and above that. Another $500 billion. Remember, $500 billion for state and local governments. This time, not just for corona-related expenses, Scott, but to bail out their mismanagement, their budgets, their pension plans. I do believe that we will have to do more for our state and local governments, especially our municipalities. I worry about my municipalities.
You want to do more than you have to, right?
That's right, and I want it to be corona-related, and you know, it just goes on and on. 20 million for endowment of the arts and humanities. One of the worst and most egregious provisions is to federalize elections in November, which means mandatory mail-in ballots. So mandatory ballots will go to every single registered voter.
Put your political cap on for a second. I've always heard the argument that's going to benefit Democrats. I tend to think there's a lot of Republicans, like Trump might have shown, there's a lot of Republicans that would vote Republican if they voted. He got them ticked off enough to vote. But I'm not sure, a mail-in ballot seems convenient. I think there might not be as partisan of issue as people think.
But here's what is partisan, and I don't agree with his codifying this ballot harvesting, which they do in California. It's illegal in many states. And what that means is, you know, right now, if it's a mail-in ballot, you can return it. A family member can return it for you. But this would allow for campaign workers, volunteers, other groups to go out and collect ballots over a period of time beyond the election even. That's what they do in California. That's how they swiped 5 congressional seats last time around.
The only California we should care about is in Montauk County.
Amen.
Walk me through there's been a COVID-1, 2 CARES Act. What has been the things the federal government's already done?
Well, you know, I think one of the greatest things was providing the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses, and Missouri has gotten, you know, just billions.
Will there be another
dollars.
round of that?
There may very well. Right now, there's about $100 billion left in the program, and the average Missouri small business has only taken out about $79,000 and in a loan, and much of that is forgivable. The whole idea of the PPP program is to keep the worker and the employee attached to their employer. So they are paying, and that part of it is forgivable. So if you're paying your payroll, that's forgivable. Then there's overhead and other rent, mortgage expenses and things. But you know, that's been very successful. What we did to extend unemployment benefits, which is a state-run program, not anything the federal government really has ever gotten into, but an additional $600 a week that will go through the end of July, plus what what the state is putting in. The stimulus checks that did go out, the $1,200 per American, plus $500 for children, if you fit within a certain category in terms of your income and such. So we provided so much money for testing, for vaccines, for therapeutics, for health cares, for $2.4 billion for the state of Missouri, and then $174 million for St. Louis County alone.
Let me ask you about testing. I'm from the Boot Hill. We love Donald Trump. It's almost scary sometimes. But to me, this has been going on for several months now. And Missourians, I hear the president say, if you want to be tested, you can get tested. That's not true for Missourians. How long do you think it'll be until Missourians get tested without having symptoms?
Well, I spoke with the governor yesterday at length about this. He said that they are able to do now in the state of Missouri 8,800 tests per day. Mm-hmm. So that's over 60,000 per week. They're doing them very aggressively in some of the hot spots, nursing homes,
sure,
some of the meat processing plants. As we begin to open up our communities, which is so important mm-hmm. here in Missouri, and I know that St. Louis County will begin its opening on Monday the 18th. They'll be prepared to go in any hot spots. They're doing random testings in 3,000 batches around the state to find out whether you're asymptomatic and you may have COVID and you don't even know. So the testing has improved. I agree. I think there were some real missteps at the beginning of this with the CDC and overpromising and underproducing. PPE is very important, along with the contact tracing, to make sure that we know where the virus is moving and can tamp down as quickly as possible. But we have provided through FEMA and other outlets much funding to go towards these measures.
My buddy Larry Miskell, commissioner in Gasconade County, if he is not sick, but just wants to know, because he's going to have people at his bed and breakfast there in Herman, he would just like to know if he's got COVID. Is it sometime in the month of June you think he'd go get tested and find out?
I believe so, and yeah. I think they've got these Abbott fast tests. I don't
mm-hmm.
know how accurate they are, but we've got several of those set up here in the St. Louis region that takes in both the 1st and 2nd congressional district that I'm honored to represent. There are some 11 drive-through testing capabilities. We've done a lot since we've been a little bit more of a hot spot in the state in terms of testing, but we've got to make sure our frontline heroes are equipped with the personal protective gear. We flatten the curve at the hospital level, which is very key, and we have to make sure that we up our testing and stay vigilant. I mean, you got to follow the guidelines of the medical professionals here, and that means the kind of social distancing that we're doing. Wear a mask when you're in a store, a restaurant, on a plane, which I'll be going on.
So that's something I've seen a lot of folks complain about masks. I think if you want to wear a mask, great, good for you. If you don't, whatever. But like at Schnucks, they ask you to wear a mask. If I'm going to go in their store, they've asked you to do that. If I don't want to go, I'll go in a different store.
That's
wear a mask. I bought one. It's in my truck. I wear it every time I go.
I do too. And the proper hand washing and
sure.
and hygiene, all those things are things that we've got to follow. And honestly, I think we're opening up our economy, and we've seen anywhere from 36 to 40 different states now that are in different phases of this. Is not always just a date certain. You have to build the confidence in the society, and that's what's important, and that's why these measures are so very important. And then making sure that we're doing what we can to help those in need. I mean, my office, nonstop, 24/7, myself, all of my staff, we are speaking to hundreds and hundreds of constituents that are calling in every single day, and I always put out wagner.house.gov. Mm-hmm. Our number here in the district, 636-779-5449. Call if you need help navigating any of these resources.
That's a St. Louis number. That's not a Washington number.
That's not a Washington number. That's here, and you'll actually talk to a live person, and we'll help you get your unemployment. We'll help you with your rebate check. We'll help the small businesses as they apply for some of these loans. If they just need a shoulder to lean on, we're there for them. And
before you head out to the airport, I want to ask you one more question. There's something I saw. Now, look, I am not epidemiologist. I don't even know what that really is. I'm just simple hillbilly. But something in my gut tells me China was a bad actor here.
Oh,
You've got something that you're working on that would actually remind folks and maybe even do something about it.
It is. You know, I'm the #2 ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So I have been in numerous briefings going way back in the very beginning of this, what became a pandemic, questioning Chinese Communist Party and their negligence and egregious behavior vis-a-vis COVID that began in Wuhan, China, and their cover-up that went back as far as November of this past year. The disappearing of scientists, the killing of doctors.
So folks are right to have their dander up.
Let me tell you what, and they allowed millions of Chinese citizens to travel during their Chinese New Year and spread this all over the world and even their own citizenry. So we need to get compensation for this. We have lost tens of thousands of lives here in the United States of America. You know, so many more that will be sick and affected perhaps for life, plus the economic toll that this has taken. It's been devastating for all of us here in America.
Do you think this will make folks who get stuff made in China now, to one, question from a business perspective, it's the unreliability of that supply chain, and two, do you really want to have your supply chain dependent on a government that'll lie to the whole world?
That's right, and one that won't follow international norms or treaties. So I've got the Compensate Americans Act, and my feeling is a lot of folks want to sue them, but knowing foreign affairs as I do, and having worked in the State Department, I know as an ambassador, the Foreign Service Immunities Act really does give people it's hard to sue anybody.
Doug Libla sued them and won in trade deals, and they just don't pay.
They don't pay. They don't follow in the WTO. They don't follow any of our international treaties, even at the UN. So you got to get them where it counts. My piece of legislation will go after Chinese assets here in the United States of America. They hold over $1 trillion in U.S. treasuries. There are sanctions that could be taken against Chinese officials and against those pharmaceuticals and supply chain folks that in China that really benefited from this COVID outbreak and pandemic. And so this would set up a fund, a compensation fund, but I think it's more realistic because I don't think we're going to get anything out of them internationally. I think the Foreign Service Immunities Act will block suing. We can try, but we've done it successfully in terms of seizing their Chinese assets and treasuries. We've done it with Cuba. We've done it with Iran. We've done it with Venezuela. So let's do it with China.
About time for China, yeah.
Let's get some compensation for Americans, and that piece of legislation is moving forward, and along with so many other things that we're working on.
Well, Congresswoman, I know you have to go. Thank you so much for stopping by with us.
My pleasure.
We'll hope you'll come back, talk a little politics later in the year.
Please do.
We'll be right back with our opinion maker panel, socially distanced, with Mark Dalton and David Barklage after this. But first, go to showmissouri.com. History of Missouri, one county at a time. This week, Carter County. Talk all things Elsinore, Van Buren, hogs, dogs, and logs with the guy that wrote the book on Carter County, Dr. Gene Oakland. Be right back after this.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations, and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back this week in Missouri Politics, our socially distanced opinion maker panel. David Barklage, Dean of the Missouri Republican Party, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Mark Dalton, Carpenters Union, thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks for having me on again.
Let's talk about little Missouri legislature politics. This last week of session, Clean Missouri, heading to the ballot, Cleaner Missouri, Dirty Missouri, I don't know what you even call it. Essentially, for folks that didn't follow at home, there was a thing to get rid of lobbyist gifts. Inside of it was a thing to change how they draw districts. Now the auditor will essentially pick someone to draw these districts. I don't think most people care, but the Republicans now want another bite at the apple. They're putting it back on the ballot. What happens?
I think it goes down in flames. I think it was a mistake for them to bring it back up, to put on the ballot. It passed with almost 70% of the vote this last time, and then a couple of people, said the voters don't know what they're talking about. We're going to change it, and then they're making it, worse than it was before.
Well, you've seen these redistricting commissions forever. The legislature usually figures out the congressional map because the members of Congress go to Washington, they send a map back and say, pass this, don't mess it up. Both parties come together and figure that out. The legislative districts usually go to a commission of like judges, right, or people they pick. These aren't, if you're a judge, you're not the most right-wing Republican normally that becomes a judge. I thought the maps were fine. The Democrats aren't a supermajority because of the maps. They're there because of guns and abortion.
Yeah, look, the effort was done because the legislature, the Republican-dominated legislature, had plenty of time to enact the reforms that were on the front end of Clean Missouri.
That's true.
And so they put themselves in this position. Now, past that, the redistricting element was a very partisan grab. Everybody knows it. It's insincere to claim otherwise. However, the Republicans have fumbled it again. The language that they passed, I don't think has a sponsor, so it's not going to be funded. I think it leaves open for the other side to use that money to beat Republicans on the head.
Disingenuous. Okay, I thought Sean Nicholson was darn near genius. One person's disingenuousness is genius.
Doesn't make you necessarily
Maybe it was ingenious
genuine.
and disingenuous. Because I mean, he did have a great idea. If they would have passed his ethics reform, he could have took advantage of it.
Yeah.
It was in there. It's not a great. I don't even think Democrats will tell you this is a fair way to do it.
Look,
but
the
there's a lot of
Republicans
folks,
gave it to him. I mean, the Republicans, by failing to do what was right on ethics reforms, gave the backdrop to put something like this in, and they gave a partisan win to Democrats because they didn't do the right thing on policy. I'll stand by that till the end.
And you go down, I think you see some people that would fund these things, look at Republican supermajorities, in the middle of this COVID pandemic, talking about brass knuckles and things, and it's just embarrassing. And I think sometimes you see folks that think, well, a little bit more balance. I don't think there's any Republican that wants a Democrat as speaker, but a little more balanced legislature might not be the worst thing in the world.
I think the one thing that's going to be a risk is, from a practical standpoint, and you've been around politics enough, the concentrations of Democrats are in two areas of the state. They're in St. Louis City and
Densely
Kansas
populated.
City. And to try to get districts, what it does is it tries to make districts more even. I like that idea. However, I think the problem with Missouri is the only way to do it is create spaghetti districts from those two cities out to rural areas. And I think that disenfranchises a lot of voters because the values of someone who lives on Washington Avenue and the priorities that they have are different than someone who lives in Washington, Missouri. And so I think that's the problem. And so it'll be interesting to see how the auditor's office translates the law into an actual map.
Well, and it's not the auditor's office who draws the maps, and the fairness is raised up on the elevation of importance. It doesn't mean that every district drawn is going to be 50-50.
No, but how they even get there.
Yeah, so you're not going to take a district from St. Louis City all the way out to Callaway County just to drag it in. So, I mean, the spaghetti district thing, I don't see that happening.
I think you're right about that. Plus, African American
districts. I don't disagree, but here's the problem is that if you don't do that, I don't know how you really make, I mean, when you had a sea of red in southwest Missouri, how do you make a district more 50-50? And so my point is, I don't know where you really use this new modification to really make any difference, except in trying to really cut or gerrymander districts. I don't know how they
No,
get there.
I think the House doesn't matter because I don't think Nicole Galloway is going to be ever tagged with decimating African American districts. A person appointed by Jay Nixon that went through DSEG, I just don't believe that. But you could take the Senate district Mike Searpoy represents and not ever leave Jackson County and make it a Democrat district, Koenig's district. You could attach maybe Randolph County instead of Cooper County to Caleb Broughton's district, and those districts change, and you could probably flip 3 seats
But Caleb's
without
is already
radical
a
changes.
50-50 district, so that's probably one that doesn't need change. The one thing though to remember is, mark my words on this, and I'll put this up, is that we'll see if the map for the House ends up putting 5, 6 Republicans in the same district. That's when you know that the
But if they're
partisan outcome
contiguous
occurred.
districts that are all around the same area, so what? That's just what happens. How many, they tried to prove a point last district, and they would go one house over and loop people in just to say they put a bunch of incumbents together.
Yep.
That's just part of the process. If it's one of those things in rural Missouri, if your town has, if your superintendent only has 2 state reps, it means he doesn't have one.
That's
You
right.
need somebody that lives in that school district. That superintendent matters to that person.
I think it makes it harder. I think this creates the potential for gerrymandering, but we won't know until
Well,
the next
every way does.
I think the people that look at this and that voted for Clean Missouri, they want more legislators going to Jeff City. They're more middle of the road. I mean, with things being as drastic as they are, you got districts that are so Republican that a Republican will never lose. So then everybody has to out-Republican each other. So you get people on Facebook cutting the heads off of chickens, and you get brass knuckles being passed. Those are issues where a Republican is still going to win.
What are you talking about?
But and it's on the other side too. When you get a district that is 90% Democratic, I mean, you get people trying to out-left each other.
I got a question.
And people in Missouri are more in the middle, and they want to see more common sense middle ground.
That is unless you live in St. Louis City or County or downtown Kansas City. They're not really wanting to see a whole lot of balance in some places in rural
If it
Missouri.
was flipped to be the same way to the left, I agree with you.
Well, but here's the question I got. Let's talk about percentages. My guess is nowadays 60, 70% of carpenters probably vote for Trump. Are you all going to be endorsing Trump this cycle?
You're a little bit high on the percentage, but I don't think so, no. He's done so much with the Department of Labor and with some of the union standards on the national level that just don't make the headlines, that it makes it tough to endorse him.
Let's talk about something that's, to be fair to everybody here, every year we do this show the last week of session, we have to do a little early. Prescription drug monitoring passed the House. It was a very spirited debate. A couple legislators figured out sometimes they cut deals on bills. Goes over to the Senate, and it's gonna I don't know, be held up. There'll be some negotiating. I think, David, what I hear from every serious Republican in this state is they just want to desperately stop talking about this. Just want it over.
It's an emotional thing. I mean, you
Sure.
look, Holly Rader has put, her heart and soul in this. There are other people. I have a candidate, Kent Sism, down in Farmington area who lost a daughter to a tragedy, and there are so many out there. So it's very personal. So you've got the people that are very scared of giving the government this kind of information versus the people that have had real experiences. Those are sort of like, I told someone the other day, the last thing you want to do in your career is run locally because it'll be the last thing you ever do in your career.
Sure.
And it's like local politics. It's too personal. And as long as you're talking about a personal issue like that, there's a winners and losers and hard feelings.
Democrats had a very good week, however this turns out. They withheld their votes a little bit. The leadership needed them on the Republican side. And they said, well, maybe give us a little something. I thought sometimes you see the minority that never have a time like this. They overshoot and ask for too much. I thought Crystal Quaid did a very good job of managing her caucus this week. And ultimately, the bill passed the House.
Yeah, Crystal's becoming known as being very smart, savvy, a good leader in the minority caucus, and yeah, that's exactly what happened this week.
It's one of the first people I've seen of this new generation that can bridge the gap to maybe the folks in St. Louis and Kansas City that don't use the word socialist as a negative and can reach out to labor groups and work with people and this week produce results.
Well, she's from a district that is sitting on an island in southwest Missouri with no other Democrats around her elected in the House. So she does know what it's like to have to work with people to come to a compromise, and that shows.
David Barklage, how is the president managing the COVID response in places that are going to matter, like Ann Wagner's district?
Look, I think this is reset politics, and we're not out of it yet. And we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know if we're going to have an economy or not have an economy. So the issues that we walked into this campaign cycle on, we don't know if they existed. I would say this. I think that Trump has been able to make a turn of reacting early to shut things down that he was criticized for, to now pushing to open up against some of the, some of the mindset. The thing that I think the strongest thing that Trump did was to give it to the states, and for those states that gave it to local leaders, because St. Louis and the density is different than Ozark, Missouri, or Ozark County, or Osage County, places like that. And so the point is, I think there's going to be some real winners and losers. I think it's sad that we've partisanized it. And I think that is divisive to the country. We open it to extremes on either side to create problems. But I think Trump has at least, it's sort of stabilized. He hasn't been as, as sort of all over the place on criticizing people. I'm not saying he doesn't still go there.
It's not overall good, but it's stopped getting worse for him.
But it is really sort of, and he listened to the medical professionals and everything else as much, and that showed a different Trump. In terms of bringing people in that were not of the Republican Party, that were actually Obama appointees, that may had a divergent view. I'm not saying he was 100% on, but I think that it showed a different Trump. I think that bodes well for him. I think the next chapter is, how does that bode for Sam Page? How does that bode for
Dalton? I think overall
Parson.
The president will not be viewed favorably in swing areas by how he handled this. But I do think that the negativity is stabilized there.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely fumbled the football on early testing, containing a lot of different things, but he has a base of supporters that it doesn't matter what he does, they're going to end up coming back to him.
All right, with a minute left, who won the week?
I would say Republican consultants won the week by pushing the legislature to pass the Dirty Missouri. They're going to make a ton of money off the campaign that's going to go down in flames anyway.
I would think... I would think that I got a beer bet with Carl Beard. I think I'm going to enjoy my beer on that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to make any money on that. I think that's a pig with lipstick, and people are going to see it for what it is. I'm going to say Rob Vescovo. He was able to pick up, and get some things done at the last minute on absentee voters to protect voters' health, many things. And I think he's maturing, and I think that soon that all of us will be in his corner, including
Tremendous week for the floor leader. There you go, winning the week. I'm going to say two senators that serve this state very well, two different senators, Scott Sifton from South St. Louis County and Jamal Nasheed from the city. They're completing their Senate terms this week. Two people that, whether you agree with their politics or not, added to the Senate and served the state incredibly well. They won the week, and we'll see you back here next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.
We just finished up this week's show, and I appreciate a second to tell you about a new thing we're doing. I'm a history buff, like I know a lot of you are if you watch the show. We're doing a thing of the history of Missouri. We're going to do it one county at a time. We call it Show Me Missouri. We're going to travel to all 114 counties of the state. We'll have a member of the Farm Bureau, county elected officials, some of your state legislators you see here on the show. We're going to talk about the history, what's happening now in the county, and how the two are interconnected. It's a passion project of mine. If you like history, I hope you'll get involved. Follow us. Go to MissouriTimes.com. You can see it. We'll probably branch it off into its own social media at some point. But you've been so good to us at the Missouri Times, the show, different papers. This is a passion project that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Show Me Missouri, the history of Missouri, one county at a time. The first county was Polk County. We had a great time. And we hope you'll go to MissouriTimes.com, find a little bit about it. And if you like the history of the state, I hope you'll enjoy it.